All right, everybody. Welcome to the month of December's Startup Grind Philadelphia. My name is Charlotte Lee. I am, for the last time today, chapter director of Startup Grind Philadelphia. My day job is chief of staff at 1776. And 1776 and formerly Benjamin's Desk, we have been hosting this chapter of Startup Grind for 5 beautiful years. Almost 60 events that we've hosted featuring entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the Philly area, as well as down in the DMV, where we have representation of our network, and in Indianapolis, where we are opening a new location early next year. I'm delighted to have all of you joining us today. As I said, there are some wonderful, familiar folks here I see in this attendee Rolodex. It's so exciting to have some of you that we've known for ages and have worked with in collaboration of support of our entrepreneurial community. So thank you for joining. If you're not familiar with Startup Grind, welcome. I'm excited to have you here today. Startup Grind is a global network in hundreds of countries, millions of members around the world who tune in to these events and participate in this community in order to support entrepreneurs, to share stories, to collaborate and connect. It has been a pleasure hosting this chapter, and I'm excited that it will continue. It's being handed off to some other local startup advocates, and I'm sure they will treat it well. I will definitely be an attendee as no longer a presenter. And if you're not familiar with 1776, we are, I'm going to still call us a global network because we have a global reach. We have people tune in from all over the world when we host our programs, and our bread and butter is supporting entrepreneurs. We feel really strongly that anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur deserves the access to resources to grow and scale and participate in the wild world of startups and entrepreneurship. And so on that, today I'm so excited to be talking to 1776 CEO Jenn Maher. Jenn and I have known each other for 4 years from the day I started with Benjamin's Desk. She and I first met in a coffee shop near our old Washington Square location and bonded over our mutual love for organizational systems and clear communication and automations. We won't bore you with all of those things today, though. We're going to talk much more about Jenn's own journey. Jenn, welcome.
Thank you, Charlotte. I have to remember not to talk about all of our inside jokes and other things, so it's more understandable to our larger community, because Charlotte and I have a long relationship and work with each other very closely.
Yes, we are. Just like that company, we are constant contact. We are in touch all the time. So this is delightful. Again, thank you to those who have joined. It's so fun to have you. Some familiar folks from even some of Jenn's history, which is a treat. Lex, hello, nice to have you. So Jenn, I like to ask, as you know, all of my guests, I want you to tell us, as if it was reading from a Wikipedia page, tell us about Jenn. Where you were born and raised, a little bit about your childhood. I'm happy to sprinkle in some of my favorite childhood stories, but you do what you would like to. But bring us sort of through, how about through college and when you started with your law firm? Let's get us up to there.
Yeah, in the weirdest twist of 2020, I am currently back in my hometown right now, which I never thought would happen. And I usually just bounce all over to our campuses. So that's been a weird twist. So I'm deep in southern New Jersey right now. We have no snow. We only got rain and wind yesterday. So that was very disappointing for all of those of you that are looking at beautiful snow outside your windows right now. I, very, very, very young, decided I wanted to be an attorney. It's the only thing I ever wanted to be. So as kids bounced around and wanted to be astronauts and firefighters and other things, I only ever wanted to be an attorney. I can't actually tell you why. Like, I don't know what the catalyst was. We don't have attorneys in our family. Neither one of my parents either went to college. So I can't really even tell you where it came from, but as long as I remember, that's what I wanted to do. And I would say I was a fairly intense child, which is a trait that has gone through today. I do everything at 110% levels. So that was my target was I wanted to be I wanted to be a partner at a big law firm. It was all I ever wanted to do. I was very fortunate that I got a scholarship to GW and was so excited to be an attorney. I graduated in 3 years and went straight to law school and went a little bit closer back to home. I went to Villanova, just outside of Philadelphia. All my family was still based in South Jersey, so I wanted to be a little bit closer to them and wanted to set up shop at a big firm in Philadelphia, which I did, and quickly realized that all of my work up to that point was not exactly where I wanted to be, and took a hard left from there.
You were litigating, probably very well, I imagine. Jenn can hold an argument, I will tell you. So I'm sure you were finding success. So what sparked this desire to become an entrepreneur?
So it was a few things. One was law firms are very hierarchical, and there's steps that you take to get to a partner, and there's year-based milestones and some less merit-based milestones. And that in the big law firm world that I was in, that didn't really sit well with me. I very much operated in the merit. I wanted to fast track myself to everything. Clearly, again, the intensity level of things. So I started just thinking, is this really what I wanted to do? I much more wanted to control my own destiny. I wouldn't have called myself an entrepreneur. I didn't think that I was going to be an entrepreneur. But as I looked back at things I did when I was younger, I was always very much an intrapreneur. Even when I was a waitress for a really long time, and helped pay expenses through college and law school through that. But one of the things I did was, I just took ownership of anything that I was doing and would change things up, change processes, systems, where creamers were kept, soup to nuts, everything, raise my voice about what I thought should be done better. But I graduated law school in 2007. In 2008, everybody that lived through it, the world sort of collapsed, a huge economic recession. So not the best time to think about just going out on your own. I didn't have a safety net. There was no golden parachute hanging around for me. So I started dabbling in real estate, and buying some residential houses, buying some foreclosures, doing that on the side, and realized, well, wow, I can just do this. If I set my mind to it and figure it out, I can learn it. I didn't know anything about real estate. I hadn't done that before. Again, nobody in my family had done anything like that. So I got to the point where it was just, you can absorb so much information that's out in the world, and so much content is free right now. And that existed years ago as well. So it was just absorbing that. And I thought, gosh, if I could just keep building content, then I could, pretty much do anything and whatever I wanted. I was also one of those kids. I had a mom that told me I could be anything, and I believed her. So I still believe her to this day. But that was how I started getting that itch that people get when they're like, this isn't for me. I need to control my own destiny a little bit more.
Yeah. So 2008 that happened, and Benjamin's Desk opened in 2012. So what kind of happened in between there? I will also say, I know that you had a child 36 hours before Benjamin's Desk officially opened. So that's also a fun fact. But kind of what happened in that interim time? How did a co-working space, how did that become sort of the determined way forward?
So a winding story, as all entrepreneurs have. I'm working at my full-time job, which still, holds you back from how much time you can invest on your other things. So it always takes longer. But the idea started coming about in about 2010, where I've been dabbling in some real estate, had reunited at that point with my now husband, and he was doing some real estate things, and we started thinking about how we could build this. He was in the military at the time, was looking at an exit plan for the military, how we could build this real estate company that was going to be, an exit path for both of us. And we went out to go find space in Philadelphia. So this is 2010, 2011. Co-working is not really a thing. Regis exists, but WeWork is not even existing at this point. It's just not really a mainstream philosophy. So when we went out to look in Philadelphia, nothing existed. So again, with the we'll just do it then. So we decided to get up running and launch our own space. So we opened a 3,000 square foot location, made lots of mistakes, and learned from that, filled the space in 3 months, expanded into another 3,000 square feet, which was the floor above us, and the building's floor plans were only 3,000 square feet on each level, so we couldn't get any more space. And then went, okay, well, what's next? How do we keep going? And that was part of the evolution. But it was like many entrepreneurs, finding a need in the market and then building what we could to solve that problem.
Yeah, and as you built up the team, I'm going to be bold here with my next statement question. I know from experience that you became fairly quickly surrounded by a group of men at the top of the ladder. And for those of you who have observed our growth story, we still have an incredible team of men within our locations. Scott, Carter, Aki, I see you all on this call, and hello. But at the leadership level, things shifted and slowly started to change. I'm curious if, and I mean, I know mostly this answer from you, but sort of what was in you that motivated you to kind of hang on to sort of, for lack of a better word, maybe kind of protect this initial seed of an idea that you had and really believe in it and push it through and resolve or remove any conflicts and continue to just power forward. Sort of what was that? What were you holding on to, and has it sort of come to what you thought it would?
So I have to back up a little bit to start that answer. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, I decided I wanted to be the first female president of the United States. Being the first female has been a marker for me in a lot of things. There is no female that's climbed the highest peak on every continent and run a marathon on every continent. So that's a bucket list item for me. And I was born into, and I'm still in, a very matriarch driven family. We are run by the females in our families, and all the way up to my great grandmother, who I knew when I was younger. So when I got into the law firm world, not surrounded by a lot of females at the top. In fact, when I started law school in 2004, it was the first year that females were enrolled more in law school than men. Barely. It was like a 51-49 split. But then you would go, much like now, where you look at, well, who are the managing partners of the top 100 law firms? And there was 2 at the time when I graduated law school. One of them was my firm, which was one of the reasons that I went there. But not a lot of other women. And I wanted to make sure that I was going to create a place where I was surrounding myself with diversity, and that was having more females, having more minorities, but making a place that was also going to be reflective of our membership. And from 2012 to 2016, I was still working full time at my law firm while this thing just started taking on a life of its own. And that it wasn't until I got to the point where this could really be my full-time job that I had the realization of, oh my gosh, this has grown into something that wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. And now I need to make some drastic changes to make sure that it is. And I've been fortunate to be surrounded with people like you who have grown within the organization. And our team now is just this incredibly diverse team that has really unique experiences, and being able to bring all of that together to help our members is part of what that original vision was.
Awesome. And you sort of touched on it when you mentioned one of your bucket list goals. But I know as sort of a pressure release and as a good thinking space, you like to run. You run a lot. And that has led you to discovering endurance races. I know you ran in high school, so has running always sort of been an outlet for you? And at what point did something trigger in you to go, wow, I can start, getting medals for this, setting really lofty goals and hanging all my medals on a pretty stand in my house? And then second to that, so when did that start, and kind of how did that motivation and intensity grow? And what is it for you now? Does it remain sort of an extracurricular? Has it much more into your therapy and release of things? And how do you see a correlation between endurance people and entrepreneurs? Because I know you've met some entrepreneurs on your endurance runs.
Again, 2020 has allowed a lot of time for reflection. So I can dive a little bit deeper, and have tried to spend some time doing that this year to understand why I am the way I am. And part of that goes into like, why did I start running? My mom signed me up for baseball and soccer when I was a little kid, and I dabbled around in different sports and lacked hand-eye coordination. So running was a good avenue for me. So I started running track when I was about 9 and kind of went all in on that and was, pretty good at it out of the gates. So that was nice. I generally don't like things that I'm not at least immediately some level of good at. I unfortunately quit things early, but when I really enjoyed it too. And part of it was I have one sibling, my sister, she's 5 years older than me. At the time I started, she was a freshman in high school. She was very good and had started also running track. And I still and always did idolize her. So always liked to follow in her footsteps for things. So then just devoted myself to running throughout high school, ran cross country, ran track. That was the only sport I did that all through middle school as well. And then I was very fortunate that I had an academic scholarship to GW. I was also very fortunate that I did have some athletic scholarships, but had the foresight for some reason when I was 18 years old to realize I wasn't going to be an Olympian, but I was going to use my brain. So let's go for the scholarship that's going to require me to keep a high GPA, because that's what's going to help me get into law school. Again, it goes back to the intensity of how I think about things and love to plan. But there's not really adult track clubs. So as I got older, running was still always a release for me. I found such joy in it. And, living in DC when I was in college, I would run around the monuments every Saturday morning. I loved when I would travel and go to new places and just go for long runs. And it was really a way for me to explore new areas and also develop this little community of people. So I just started running longer and longer distances. I was actually a sprinter when I was younger, quit cross country at one point because I thought 3.1 miles was too long. But ended up
just that coming out of your mouth and knowing you now is very funny.
Yeah. Ended up just running further and further distances. And then because I can only do things at 110%, was like, okay, well, I should probably run a marathon at this point. So started running marathons.
When was your first and where was it?
My first marathon was in 2007. It was in Florida. I ran the first, and there's now been a lot more of them, but it was the first breast cancer marathon. And my mom was a breast cancer survivor. So when that came up as the first, I was like, this is perfect. This is it. This is the race. And it was awful. And it was completely awful. And I was sore for like a week afterwards, could like barely get on my flight the next day, but really found joy in the suffering too, which is also something I've had deep reflection on. But long story short, I did my very first triathlon the summer I was studying for the bar exam. I needed that to be I needed a physical distraction from the mental energy that I was putting in. And when I got to my law firm, there was a partner a couple offices down the hall from me who had done some Ironmans, and she had her medals hanging up. And I said, well, God, what my intensity kicks in. I'm like, well, I should do that, right? Get to that level. And I told her I had a 5-year plan to do an Ironman, and she said, you should do it in 2. So I then started, going into that. And again, because I'm always looking at, well, what's the next thing? Once I had done a bunch of marathons, then I discovered the world of ultra marathons, and it's just kind of spiraled ever since, that, I now have a whole calendar built out for 2021 because obviously many races were canceled in 2020, and then just kind of filled the gaps in. But it still very much is therapy for me. It's the place that I do my best thinking. It's the place where I can really relax, which sounds weird to many people that aren't runners, but those that are completely get what I'm saying.
No, I mean, the number of times I've known you've had a race and like on a Sunday late morning, you'll be like, I have lots of things to tell you on Monday morning. Because I was also shocked to discover that you don't listen to anything while you run. You are just like the wind in your footsteps, which I didn't find a love for running until I discovered podcasts. because it distracts my mind enough in that first like mile and a half, 2 miles till I like really get into the groove. And then passes the time, because otherwise I was listening to songs and I was like, okay, 2 songs, that's about 10 minutes. All right, I'm probably done now.
And I should say, I only run outside regardless of what the weather is.
Treadmills.
And I just don't like treadmills. And when I was younger, training and racing in high school, you're not allowed to wear headphones or anything. And even now, you're not allowed to wear headphones for almost any USATF certified race. You're not allowed to have anything in. And I don't listen to anything while I bike ride for safety issues, of course. So I just got used to it. And then when my kids were born, one of those like just bring your kids into your life, I just started running with them. So because I was always responsive to them, crying when they were younger or yelling at me that they wanted something as they got older, I never got in the habit of really listening to anything. Occasionally, if I'm going on, I've done some really long runs by myself this year with the lack of racing. So occasionally I'll take my phone with me now, again, mostly for safety reasons if I'm going 20 miles. So occasionally I'll listen to something, but it's also just been a really great way for me to just feel free. So I love the fact that you just need shoes.
Yeah, disconnected.
And then,
it's nice.
you just need shoes, and then you walk out the door and you just start going. And and sometimes I have a route planned, and sometimes I don't have a route planned.
Yeah, cool. We did have a question that came through, which is backtracking a little, but it is interesting. How did you manage to start something while having a full-time demanding job? And then when did you decide to quit the job and run the company full time? Was that sort of like a trigger point? Was it based on the growth of the organization?
So I'll start with the easier one, which is the second question of when did I decide to quit and run the company full time? That was purely a financial decision. I needed the company to be at a certain point for me to leave my full-time job. That was it. It didn't, I didn't have to match my salary, but I needed the company to be able to pay me something to be able to just live. Again, didn't have like a nest egg from parents or anything else like that. So it was just, that was a trigger point, and that was building up, and that took 4 years, right? There was employees of the company was growing, but I needed it to get to a certain point for me. And then how did I do that starting a company? While I had a pretty demanding full-time job. One, it took 4 years for it to get to that point. So it doesn't happen overnight. So don't be discouraged by that. I also just worked really weird hours. I mean, this was my life for a lot of that time, where I was working at my day job and even traveling for that as well. But this was the thing that I worked on from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. and a thing that I worked on from 6 p.m. until midnight every night. And it helped that this was, I was working on it with my husband as well. So that was, what we talked about at dinner every night. That was all encompassing to your life.
And Allison asked a question, which is, Allison, thank you. This is literally the segue I was about to hit. As you mentioned, your husband is also an entrepreneur. His company has seen great success, and both of you have also things you participate in your local communities and whatnot. So I know that family is extraordinarily important to you, and I know that you also have a fascinating sort of mixed, blended, beautiful family that has branched out into magnificent ways. So even going back to when, as I mentioned, your son was born, basically opening day of Benjamin's desk. Talk a little bit about the support system you've kind of created with your family, and sort of how that's helped you.
So in those early days, I was in Philadelphia, about an hour and a half away from my hometown, which was where my mom and my sister lived. And that was really our family unit. It was me, my mom, my sister. And they were, super helpful to help out when they could, of course, but they were further away. My husband and I grew up together. So my in-laws were in the same town, so they would help out anytime that they could as well. My mom ran a daycare. So there was definitely times where I would have to travel and leave my kids with her for a few days, which was then very easy for her to help because she could just bring those kids in, but I couldn't bring her, right? I had to just take my kids, and then she would take care of them. So that was incredibly helpful. And then as time grew on, I was very fortunate that a few years ago, my mom retired from her daycare, and I moved her up to Philadelphia to be with us, which was just, game changing, to allow me to travel in a different way, allow me to work in a different way, and really, man, navigate this year in a different way. We had, like many of you probably, school switched to completely virtual. My kids are 6 and 8 now. 7 and 8. My daughter just turned 7 like a week ago. Catch up on that. When school switched to virtual, like that was in and of itself its own challenges. Many parents are still dealing with those same issues. How are you productive and navigating that environment? And, growing up, she was my rock. And this year she's been my rock growing through it too. And just navigating that, which is the answer to why I'm back in my hometown now, that I still travel up to Philly, but having her here back in my hometown has just been super beneficial for me to do anything, pretty much.
Yeah. And I know, we've talked about that, obviously first being a power lawyer and then being an entrepreneur, and especially because Mike is an entrepreneur, there is a lot of time where you're not your nuclear family. But I can attest to being on an Amtrak at whatever hour, and even mid-conversation you would say, hang on just a second, I have to call my kids. So is that something that you just already, has that been ingrained in you of still creating those prioritization moments and ensuring that they know, because I know you've shared with them, like, this is what mom's doing and this is what mom's building. And even if they are, 7 and 8 now, and when they were, as I met them, 3 and 5, even then they understood, and Elle would parrot, these very powerful, women empowering statements that you have, that you taught her. So how do you balance that? And what are sort of those, no matter what foundational things that you ensure happen with your family to keep that connectivity?
Again, this year has changed a lot, which has been really interesting, but first and foremost, for our family, that dynamic works of us both being entrepreneurs and having a support system, and our kids are spending time when they're not with us with grandparents, which is just an amazing set of circumstances, which often happens in other countries and doesn't always happen in America.
Indeed.
So that we could kind of emulate how that works. And it's about being a role model for my kids in the way that I want to be a role model. So I want to instill in them that if they, if my daughter decides she wants to be the first female president, and that's, gosh forbid, not a thing by the time she's constitutionally eligible to be president, I want her to think that that's an option for her. So I love that, they'll look at me and look at Mike and how we've kind of, not seamlessly in any way, but like manage this balance. They know when, like, I have to go take a conference call, or he has to go on a call, or when I'm going to be on video if they're home from a virtual day or homesick, or however we're navigating those particular circumstances. But it's about being a role model to them. And I have instilled all of these like memorized phrases in my daughter, like females are the future and you can do anything that boys can do and all these other pieces. But I also want to instill that in my son too, of balancing, like, respecting women and what that means and how you work with women in the workplace, and instilling that from a young age as well. I bought him a book that's called Boys Love Pink. And it's a whole book about how colors aren't, I hate gender stereotypes.
Gender normatives. I know.
I cannot stand gender norms and gender stereotypes. I can't stand them. So it's been instilling that in my kids from a very young age as well, and modeling that. So I'm very much an action speak louder than words person. So I can tell them they can do all these things. And that's part of the running too. They come to all my races. They've been in races with me. So I want them to see of like, well, my mom does all this crazy stuff. They think that's normal. Like that's a normal part of their lives, because it has been their whole life.
Awesome. Well, let's change tack a little bit. You are now the CEO of a network of spaces. We are up down the East Coast. We're heading into the Heartland. What have you seen over the last couple of years that has maybe changed in the innovation space? I know we've been talking a lot now about the importance of these innovation districts, cities, full municipalities who are really bought into this idea of the cyclical nature of entrepreneurship and innovation and how that benefits everybody. What are you seeing? What are some of your hopes for the future? Hopes for 1776? What trends are you seeing? What's new?
Yeah, that really is part of it. I think that innovation in some ways years ago was much more siloed, where you look at a company, I'll pick on defense innovation. So like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, they would have their innovation silos and they'd have their innovation teams, but it was often hard for them to break out of that. Maybe they ran a corporate accelerator or a corporate incubator. Maybe they did some acquisitions, but what we've seen evolve over the past couple of years, which I think is just going to continue to evolve, and now the pandemic has actually accelerated this, is these innovation districts and who are the partners and how they're working together. So how corporate partners are coming together, how government, local, state, sometimes even federal government are coming together, higher education institutions, all to be these catalysts for change. So when you put together these ecosystems of startups, which is what's really going to be an economic driver for our country going forward, a big job creator for us going forward is these small businesses and startups that are, surviving the pandemic now, trying to survive the pandemic now, or will be launched out of the pandemic, that there's a lot of resources that they need to be able to take their business to the next level. Some of them are capital resources. Some of them are subject matter experts, mentors. We're seeing higher education institutions, developing innovation centers, entrepreneurship departments that didn't exist like they did before. All of that coming together is what we want to be a part of at 1776 going forward. And I want to be a part of it out of the hot spots of Boston, New York, and Silicon Valley. It's really noisy. There's a lot happening. Obviously, those markets are really just changing now anyway because of the pandemic. But the work we do, I feel like it is really morphed into some economic development work, and how we're working with organizations that are mission aligned from that perspective. And I use organizations in terms of, again, nonprofits, local city governments, even down to the neighborhood level to, the corporate partners and higher education that we work with as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the last couple of years, there's been sort of a brain shift where innovation and entrepreneurship were like their own thing. And if you didn't know about them, you didn't know anything. And now they're becoming synonymous just with like growth and progress, it's been so exciting to be part of the company and see and hear and work with organizations, large corporate organizations who are starting to break down those barriers and really embrace that everyone is better, if the curtain is drawn back a little bit and resources are shared and information is shared. It was something I discovered, I delighted in when I moved to Philadelphia. I had previously been in a myriad of cities across the country, and not in the entrepreneur space. So I don't really know what this is like everywhere else, but I know particularly in Philadelphia, and I've started seeing it happen in other places, that there's also a mind shift of the idea of sharing resources. That I think when people would say, I'm an entrepreneur, previously folks would imagine, the like stereotypical, like in the show of Silicon Valley, we're all housed up in this, creepy house and working in the garage, and it's, strange. And now I think it's just about a mindset, and it is accessible. And when I moved to Philly, what I saw was that people wanted to share. There wasn't this like, me, it's mine. I will be the only one that can succeed in this thing. There has been this expansion of, I guess, a recognition and awakening of, if I share this, that person might succeed in this moment a tiny bit more than I did, but they will remember that and likely they will pay it back. But also it will build strength in the ecosystem I'm part of, and that can only serve to benefit me. Have you seen that? I mean, again, my experience in entrepreneurship is primarily in Philly and in the regions we serve, but is that something that you are seeing also nationwide? Are you hearing that resources are just being opened and shared more?
Yeah, very much so. And again, I keep going back to a lot of things that have changed this year, but this year has drastically changed everybody's lives. And some of those things will stick and some of them won't. But the community aspect has developed itself even more this year. And a lot of people now subscribe to the fact that success is not a limited resource. It's not something that if somebody else has it, I can't have it either. Yes, exactly. It's infinite multiplying pie that will just, keep going. The best pie that could ever exist. It just keeps coming. And that we're all better together. And when we look at the communities that we're trying to build, and it's difficult in these circumstances where everything is virtual, but bringing people together, whether that is digitally or in person, which we hope to be able to do in the future, bringing them together allows people to humanize things in a different way and personalize those things. And then you can get to that level of, I don't need to step over you or on you for me to find my own success. And that's within our company, that's within our larger communities, and that there are more shared resources. And, I see it, just to give us some examples, like within the capital arena. And people think about money as a limited resource, where like, well, I don't want to tell you the angel investors that I'm talking to, because then like they may not want to invest in my company. And there are angel investors that certainly have X amount of money that they are distributing this year, and this is how it's going to work. But if you share that resource and that's the right investor for them, they're going to share the right investor for you. And that's how we're actually going to be able to move things forward. And by the way, all the investors talk to each other too, in every community. So they will share the resources together as well. And of course, to put my attorney hat on, there's IP that's developed, and there are times and places to be, protective of proprietary information. And I'm a big believer in, getting your copyright and trademarks and patents and getting all of that in order. And it can really provide a lot of value to your company. For the vast majority of companies, particularly like SaaS technology-based companies, you're not going out and getting a patent for what you're doing. There's other protections that you'll have, and different moats that you will create. But those moats don't have to not let anybody in. Moats usually have bridges.
They do. Oh, that was deep. Write that one down, everybody. Yeah. Moats usually have bridges, people. I want to ask you, and I mean, this is like a little funny because I am on your team, but it's been really interesting for me to observe in our hiring practices that you have often seemed to have a little bit of a different approach, and that rather than saying, here's this very, very carefully defined role, particularly when it comes to growth within our team, it's something I've always been very proud of. You really like to find what motivates people and where people are happy and comfortable and what will make them want to work hard. Can you identify sort of where that came from? Is that an experience you had or didn't and so wanted to apply it? And how have you seen that work in the spaces where you've been?
Yeah, I've never really thought about where it came from, but when I look back at my law firm time, which was really, I started working when I was very young, but that was my first full-time job, and really my only full-time job. And then I became an entrepreneur. There was a little bit of create your own destiny. Some cases you had to take, but other times you could seek things out. If you heard that something came in and you wanted to be a part of that, or if you had an interest in a particular area of law, you could develop your own specialty. So I guess I just kind of absorbed that to hire good people, and then the good work will get done. So there's a list of things, right? There's always, in any position or a job description or the roles that we're all fulfilling now, there's stuff that has to get done. There's a long to-do list of things that I'd love to say, I don't really feel like doing this, or I don't want to do this today. So we all have that mix too. So I'm not ignoring that fact. But if you're hiring the right people and they're happy in what they're doing, none of us punch a clock. There's no like, be here at 9, be available at 9. But like, if you're getting back from a run or you wanted to take your dog for a walk, like that's not a big deal. So it's about trusting people that they're going to do the job that they want to do. And we have different, kind of departments. I'm using the word department broadly because many of these departments are like one person. But like within marketing or programming or other pieces, and campus managers tend to wear a lot of different hats, but we always want to figure out like, what's the thing that you're passionate about? So you could contribute. Do you want to contribute to marketing because that's where a skill set is, or that's something that you want to learn more about? That's usually even the better scenario of just exposing people to lots of different aspects of the company and thinking about what their own growth path could be and what they can do in their own professional development as well.
Yeah, I mean, just for the audience to kind of like drive that point home, I had maybe been with the organization for like 3 weeks or something, and we had a video shoot scheduled in Wilmington, Delaware, and I hopped in the passenger seat with Jenn. She asked me a little bit about a little more about my background. Was like, you did this and this, right? Okay, cool, and very quickly honed in on sort of my natural skill set, which maybe is not my passion. Organizing documents and spreadsheets isn't like, yes, but I identified that I'm good at it. And she very calmly said to me, I think your skills are ones that will serve you well and really serve my company. So if you're okay, I'm going to just take you along for the ride. I'm going to wrap you under my right wing, and you're going to come along for that. And it has, I mean, obviously been a delightful journey. 4 years later, here we are, and we are, weirdly, sometimes fearfully, sometimes fearlessly leading this thing. But it's something I've tried to take to heart and really continue to do. From your example is take time to really observe our team and start to understand what it is they do love about their job and try to provide for them more opportunities to do those things. It's something also that I know you and I have talked about the idea of managing up and down. And I don't know if this is how we were raised. I don't know if it is because we are strong women who have, battled through our various challenges. But I'm a firm believer in that it is the manager's job to code switch for each of their individual people. And I think that that's something you've also, that we've worked really well together on is making sure, when you're dealing with different people, some people are super motivated by challenge and competition, and some people shrink from it. And I would never want to tell someone who shrinks in a competitive landscape that they have to be competitive, because that's probably the fastest way to lose really quality human beings. So I think it's really been an interesting way to approach our team, and I think it's brought us some success. Again, to your point, we have an incredibly diverse, just in backgrounds alone, and stories and where they've come from, their journeys. It's been really interesting. We're going to maybe do 5 more minutes of these sort of longer wind questions, and then a couple of rapid fire. Audience, if you have any questions for Jenn, pop them in there. I've appreciated those so far. I wanted to ask you about your sort of desire and maybe almost like a mission to really give back. I know you have been involved in organizations supporting veterans. I know you have some very strong feelings about rehabilitation from incarceration. I know you feel very strongly about supporting the communities you're a part of. Again, did that come from way back? Is this something that, if we do some kind of big exit or somehow become a $1 billion company, that you're going to hop out and really dedicate yourself to philanthropic ventures? Where does that, and is there one that you would choose above all?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think it's I've talked about it a lot, but you're so shaped by childhood experiences, and we didn't grow up with a lot, and that was partially our circumstances, but also partially because my mother to this day still believes that if there's a roof over your head, food on the table, and clothes on your back, that's all you need. And clothes on your back means not name brand. I hated that she wouldn't buy me Gap shoes or whatever I wanted when I was younger. And as I've gotten older, I realized that those things don't matter, anymore. But I've seen her, take the coat and the scarf off of her body and give them to somebody else that needed it. It was actually one of my concerns about her moving to the city was like, you're going to just go through coats if you're just handing them out to every person that you're seeing. So I got her to, develop the little kits because Philadelphia has a large homeless population that are, particularly this year, like hand sanitizer, tissues, maybe a couple of bucks, socks, other things like that. So she could always feel like she was giving, but that was always instilled in me of like, you take what you need and you give out the rest. And I've had a couple of different focuses, I think, some aligned with the entrepreneurship. So I serve on a couple of boards in Philadelphia, and it's very, very much all of them are orienting back to, or at least my role on them is orienting back to diversifying entrepreneurship and making it more accessible. I never thought about being an entrepreneur because I don't think I was ever exposed to it growing up or in the way I thought I should have been exposed to it. So I want to, break down those doors and expose it in a different way. But I've because my mom's a cancer survivor, I've been very involved in a lot of cancer organizations. There's another one I'm involved with now that's focused on pediatric cancer. And it's always been those, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And I've always embodied that of what's the next thing that, selfishly helps me feel like there's more purpose to the work I'm doing, which is why I love the work that we do at 1776 so much, because it's so purpose driven. When you see a company get that raise and hire a couple more people, like that is really purpose driven work that makes me feel really good about the work that we're doing. But all of that I think is innate in the way that I grew up. And yes, if I won the Powerball lottery tomorrow, I would be exceptionally, I think, philanthropic with a lot of the work that I would do.
Yeah. We had another question from Vineet, who asked, what do you think is lacking in the Philadelphia area to build a more dynamic, like the Bay Area, startup culture? I know we've talked, you mentioned on a call earlier today, as we have so many, about New Jersey, and that they, it took herding all the cats and pulling all the teeth, but they have a beautiful program that grants money to entrepreneurs to pay for a year of space, like a space like ours. And so I know you mentioned that government programs are a huge thing that are lacking and could really develop more. What else do you see, particularly in Philadelphia, but in other regions that we serve, things that are working, that are lacking, or things that are missing and you hope to see?
So the one thing is the low hanging fruit, and it's access to more early stage capital. So the reason why like the Bay Area thrives like that is an early stage capital, typically I'm talking about angel investor capital. And a lot of that is done by serial entrepreneurs. So the Bay Area has a lot of that. Austin has a lot of that now. But Austin was just like Philly 20 years ago, right? So how did they get there? People like living there, right? In Austin, the weather's nice. I don't quote me on this. I think there's no income tax in Texas, which is one of the other things. There's some huge tax advantage, obviously, which is a lot of why companies are there. But in Philadelphia, we lack a lot of that. There's some serial entrepreneurs, but that's just a cyclical thing that we need to get to. There need to be more exits here for those people to exist to give more money back. There also, what we're seeing that I hope will be accelerated is a generational wealth change of hands. A lot of Philadelphia money is old real estate money, sticks and bricks, and just investing in hard buildings. As we see that generational wealth change, I'm starting to see more investments in technology and other things outside of just pure real estate plays. So I think we need to pull along with that. The second piece is really that we have to stop operating in silos. There's so much that's done within its own little vertical, and having the city break down some of its walls and accessibility and making sure that the resources that it has are getting dispersed. And we've seen some of that start to happen more with the pandemic. The city of Philadelphia gave $150,000 to Philly startup leaders as a grant program to invest in companies that are coming through the accelerator program. That was really a catalyst for other money to come on top of that from private organizations, private donors, even just individuals to contribute in that. And Philly Startup Leaders now has a little over $600,000 that's distributing in their grant program. So the city started there. The city also funds PIDC, which has done a lot of pandemic relief programs through this for startups and small businesses. But how are we taking that information and distributing it out to the people that we need? And how are the higher education institutions that exist in Philadelphia contributing to that, and not contributing it to just, we bring people in, we give them a 4-year education or they get a graduate degree and then they go back into the world, but are certificate programs more accessible? Are they providing space for coding workshops and boot camps and all these other pieces? And we've done some of that work at the Pennovation Center and provided access to coding boot camps and other pieces. But how are we all working together? And that's something that's also really difficult during this year, because I can't call 10 people and say, can we come and meet in this conference room and whiteboard some things and figure out what the path is going to be forward. But we're getting better at that. But, a lot of those committees, organizations exist in other places like the Bay Area. And we're just kind of getting our act together in Philly on coalescing around that.
Yeah. Oh, Allison just posed a fun question. How will 1776 help preserve the personality of the place that they are in? Allison, I saw you mention that you are tuning in from Indy. So I think that's what you said. Oh no, you're in Pennsburg, PA. Oh no, that's a different Allison. 2 Allisons. Okay, yes, I'm in Indy. Okay, Allison, I thought so. Good, excellent. Yes, because we're moving to the Heartland. We're going to be opening a space. I'll let you take this. Of course, I would want to answer. But if you
I'm glad that you're in Indy, because that's the example I was going to use for the space that we're launching later in February, March, depending on construction schedule, of course. So one of the ways that we do that is what kind of team we build in those places. So Danielle McDowell was hired as our managing director. She is Indy diehard. Like, I don't know what the comparison is in Indy for the Philly bleed green, but that is Danielle, and she brings with her a whole network. She's a serial entrepreneur and has a lot of relationships already in the Indy community. And cream and crimson are black and gold. Yeah, bleeding and
you have to choose loyalties.
Yeah. So it's really about bringing the team together and how they are going to take the mini playbook that we're going to give them and say, hey, here's what's worked for us. And this is how this is the playbook, but you have to be able to shape it your own. And that's why we were so lucky to find Danielle and bring her on. It's crazy. She joined us about 6 weeks ago. I can't believe it's even been 6 weeks already, but she gets to look at the indie scene and go, what does the indie scene need here? So we run these monthly programs called Capital Stacks, where we'll bring together different types of investors across different stages, different industries, all different pieces, and then curate the startups around them, where we've developed that program. But then Danielle gets to take it and say, okay, this is the format, but these are the investors that we're going to plug in. And these are the startups we're going to bring in, because I want to make a life sciences focused capital stack, because that's what's going to work best for our members. And that's going to evolve as well. It's going to be a different stack that she's running in March that then she's running the following March, because hopefully all the companies are growing. So that's one of the ways is not taking our team and just throwing them in indie, but we're bringing in a homegrown person from those areas that knows what's happening. And I mean homegrown as like part of the ecosystem. And then how we're working with our partners in that area is the biggest piece too. So we're working with 16 Tech out in Indianapolis, and they've just been incredible. We are super mission aligned. It's kind of the example of like, we dated with 16 Tech for a long time before we got married to make sure that our missions were really aligned with each other. And we are committed to the same outcomes, which is, how we're enhancing that neighborhood and the community that we're building this place in, how we're setting forward Indianapolis and the greater region as well. And Danielle is really the catalyst for us as the boots on the ground in Indianapolis.
Yeah. And I will add, just as cherry on top, I've always been very proud that rather than we come out and say, we know what's best for you, little startups, we ask what they need. And then we try to create that, and so knowing those needs regionally, but also nationwide, network-wide for us, helps us stay true to what those spaces, are trying to do, but also help them expand their blinders a little bit and say, like, yes, life sciences, but have you considered this great thing? So that's awesome. I'm going to take us rapid fire through some questions that I know you've heard me ask before, but I'm curious your answers. Beach or mountains?
Oh, easy. Beach.
Yeah.
I grew up at the beach.
I was going to say, you grew up at the beach. Also, when I first moved to Philadelphia, I learned the term down the shore and I started using it. And then Jen, we would try to have conversations where she'd be like, I'm going to the beach. And I was like, is there a different beach? I don't know. Like, we don't call it the shore because we lived there. So beach, I knew that answer. I think I also know this answer. If you were taking a road trip, do you prefer to be the driver or the passenger?
Oh, the passenger.
Yes.
Yeah. Charlotte has been my chauffeur on many a trips.
Many U-Haul truck drives, mostly. What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, I'm super boring, vanilla.
But
I'll be
right if it's done right.
I'll be more specific. I don't actually really like ice cream per se. I like custard and soft serve. Like ice cream in like a pint. It doesn't interest me at all. Again, it's like boardwalk beach vanilla soft serve.
Yeah, and I know I knows your very, very deep love of fried food. Mm-hmm. And while I know you have removed many of those things, if you could only choose one fried food to consume ever again, what would it be?
Oh man, that's such a tough one.
I know.
I really do like everything fried. It would probably be fried shrimp. It's been like a standard of mine, and the restaurant that I worked at growing up, the Bellevue Tavern in Cape May Courthouse, New Jersey, shameless plug, makes a fried shrimp hoagie where we take fried shrimp and put it on a hoagie with cheese and lettuce, tomato, and onion, and it is delicious. So there's a lot of versatility. You could do a shrimp parmesan. You could just eat fried shrimp. You could just do a fried shrimp hoagie. There's a lot that could happen.
I'm very glad I opened that. What is, I know you love automations. What's your favorite one? What is your favorite like useful app or tech enabled thing that you love utilizing?
Not the most concise answer, but it's a lot of the Gmail plugins.
They've gotten really good.
They've gotten really good. There's templates in them that you can put in. There's autofilling as part of AI that just kind of learns as what you're doing. And we're a G Suite company. But it's helped save some time on triggering emails, timing of emails, auto responsing, auto follow-ups with emails that I've sent if I need to follow up a couple days later, but that's helped a lot. I really like a lot of the features that they've been developing on the Gmail platform specifically. Yeah.
All right. Final question. What is one thing you hope will never be fully automated, but there will always be some kind of human part about it?
Wow. I've heard you ask this question, and I don't think that I've ever thought about it from my perspective. Child care and rearing, I think it has to be it. I clearly have like more deeper insights into how my childhood affected me. And I think there's just, with Zooms and everything else that our kids are going through these days, the lack of human touch and human experience, I think we haven't even really started to feel how that's affecting teenagers down to really young children. So not even just automation, but like removing technology from that aspect, I think is going to be super helpful to us as a society going forward.
Yeah. Well, Jen, this has been delightful as always. And we get to hop on another call all together momentarily. But I appreciate your willingness to voluntold you that you were going to be my final guest. We planned our November session. Then I was like, and Jen, congrats. I will be interviewing you last. Yay.
By the way, it was because I didn't attend one of our exec meetings. And then the next day, Charlotte was like, so we made a decision at the meeting that you weren't at.
Yeah, she didn't attend. So Jess and Melissa and I said, great. So it'll be Jen. That'll be perfect. But I hope everyone who attended, if you knew a little of Jen, I hope you have learned some new and exciting things. I know people have referred to you as stoic or mysterious. So I hope that this, peeled a couple layers and showed them that you are a delightful and very human person. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining today. Again, stay tuned for what Startup Grind Philadelphia is going to have in store in the future. They will be featuring more delightful entrepreneurs from the Philly area and supporting collaboration and conversation through those events. It's going to be great. And please stay in touch with us at 1776. We are going to continue to run our virtual programming. It is almost 100% all of our programs free to the public. We really encourage you to hop in. If you have a subject matter expertise, hit us up. We'd love to feature you. We'd love to talk to you. We would love to share your expertise with our startups. As Jen said, we really believe that it is those people with that entrepreneurial drive who are going to reinvigorate our economy, bring our country back to, what it could be, what maybe some people envision, restarting those economies and finding some extraordinary regional and nationwide growth. So thank you all for tuning in and participating in that journey. 1776 team, I'll see you in a minute on our call. Happy holidays to everybody. If you've already celebrated one, if you are about to, if you just choose to be winter participants and enjoy the season, I wish everyone health and peace into the new year, and we'll catch you soon. Take care, everybody.
Everyone.